Now, I want you to think, what's he getting at? Why, when accused of what he was accused of, would he be going through a walkthrough of biblical history as that would make sense? That would be like if someone said, Jared, did you steal that car? And I said, well, in the early 1900s, Henry Ford had a dream. And he'd be like, what do you, yes or no, And so why? Why did he do this? Why did he tell a story to answer the question? Well, after reading this several times and looking at it from different angles, I think I have 4 good reasons why Stephen did what he did and chose and curated what he chose. So first, number 1, this is the least important. Maybe I'm ramping these up in importance subconsciously. But first, I think he wanted to display on some level that he knew the Bible, that he was not trying to change the Bible or twist it. If you read the sermon, he's not twisting any Bible stories. He's giving it straight. The Sanhedrin would have to come to the fact that they could hate this man for many reasons, but it would not be because he was twisting the words of the Old Testament. He wasn't trampling on the word. He wasn't biblically illiterate. He wasn't a nobody that they could toss around. He wasn't just shouting things as a crazy person. No, this was a man who knew the book. Secondly, if you look at the stories that Stephen chose, you will notice the heavy emphasis on God working and moving and revealing himself to his people outside the traditional promised land. So in Abraham's story, he maximizes on the fact that God appeared to Abraham in Mesopotamia, in the land of the Chaldeans, he says, and speaking to him outside the promised land first, calling him into the promised land. He says he didn't get an inheritance in the promised land in his lifetime. In Joseph's story, he mentioned that he was sold into Egypt, that he prospered in Egypt, that he was brought up in the wisdom of the Egyptians. Again, he says in Moses' story that he was brought up in the Pharaoh's home. He was instructed by the Egyptians again. He spent 40 years exiled in Midian, which is not the promised land. He experienced the burning bush, the voice of God, one of the great Old Testament moments and miracles, not in the land, but on Mount Sinai, on a rugged mountaintop in the wilderness. He lived 40 more years and did many miracles in the wilderness. The point is clear. God has met with pivotal people in pivotal moments of Bible history outside the land in unexpected ways. That's number 2. Thirdly, Stephen makes the case the temple is not ultimate in the way that the current leadership was making it out to be. In verse 44 through 50, he reminds them that the tabernacle, which was a tent, really, came into existence in the wilderness, which means Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, all the patriarchs worshiped God without a temple or a tabernacle or a central meeting place. He then reminds them that it was the tabernacle, not the temple, that went into the promised land with Joshua, that it functioned for hundreds of years. Even King David never had a temple. Not until Solomon did a brick and mortar temple even exist. And then he follows this up with a psalm that would say God has dominion over the entire universe. While it's good to worship him in the temple, it's not like what the Grinch thought would happen down in Whoville when he took all the presents and Christmas trees away, that somehow Christmas would be canceled without the tree. No, God was still God without the temple. That's what he had to teach them. The Jews had come to believe that their faith was completely dependent upon the existence of a physical location. And fourthly, Stephen makes the case that God's people have tended to be resistant to godly leadership and the Holy Spirit throughout their entire history. The 12 brothers of Joseph were jealous of him and sold him. Moses defended a Hebrew as he was being beaten by an Egyptian, and they took the Egyptian side. They said to Moses regularly this phrase, "Who made you ruler and judge over us?" when he tried to lead. They refused to obey him. They asked Aaron to make a golden calf when he was gone too long. Every prophet they ever had, they treated poorly. And these are just hand-picked examples, but certainly we can think of examples like Jeremiah in our mind, where it's just the prophets weren't exactly honored. So yes, Stephen is giving a historical account, but these are chosen specifically to speak to the accusations against him. That he was speaking against Moses, that he was speaking against the law, that he was speaking against the temple, and that he was somehow changing the message of the Bible to make it this weird Christian thing. But Stephen turns what is supposed to be a defense of himself into a lesson for those who have accused him falsely. Stephen taught the Jewish leaders a critical lesson in this moment of defense, and will set up what's about to happen next.